have any written notes? We have everything here. Now, can you hear me? You can hear? During the conversation, I may forget about it and lower my tone. Remind me, just ask me louder, and I will remember again. How many of you, very good, here, there's one chair. One there. Yeah. How many of you have seen movies about Leonardo? Have you seen a movie called Leonardo Da Vinci Code? How many of you have seen Da Vinci Code? Okay, you have not seen Da Vinci Code? You do? Okay, before we start, I ask you to forget everything about this. It's not, I mean, the movie is a fantastic enterprise, a great venture, historical money-making book and movie. Like 50 million copies sold of the book. So I respect the initiative as a financial enterprise. It was a great marketing. But talking about the real Leonardo, you really have to forget the movie. Forget the Magdalena and so forth. We have to really start from scratch. Forget the movie and let's start from what could be Leonardo in reality. Let's go into Leonardo's mind. So I have this in front of you. Let's go to the year 1000. In the middle here, you have year 1000. See the dates here? Did you find it? In the middle, 1000. Okay, so here we are, Guido d'Arezzo. This is the time, the estimated time when Guido d'Arezzo created the notes, a song to St. John, a hymn, and the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, or ti. You know those notes? Can you say with me, what are they? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, or si is the original. Americans do ti, and so do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. The do used to be ut. Ut. So what is important about this note, I will tell you about the hymn now, how this came about after we actually hear the music. Now, with Guido d'Arezzo, we have some very important music, which is, you see there says, Mas Omar Me, Re, Fa, Mi, Re. You see that? And then we have later on, Missa Virgine, La, Sol, Fa, Re, Mi. From Guido d'Arezzo, we have some of the most important music produced later and used for centuries after, based on these names and melodies. This is the music that Leonardo knows. This is the music that Leonardo is passionate about, and he creates poetry and music at the same time. So when you think of Leonardo, think that we are in a different world of music, nothing to do with us today. Even Bach, which for us is old, right? Bach 750. You have to think Bach was 300 years after Leonardo. So it's like if today we listen to music of the next 300, 2,350. You know, it's another world, it's like another planet. So forget the music that we know, even the intervals, everything that at the time of Leonardo was performed or was played, we couldn't understand today. The sounds would sound off pitch. It's a world of music totally different than what we know today. So what we are going to try to give you today now is a sample of this music, but it's not what was exactly. Because the pitch, the intonation, the sounds, the distances between the sounds were different, and I will explain to you later a few of these things within the time that we have. So, I want you to hear these major themes, and then we will connect to this Leonardo's music. Here we are two fantastic musicians. You could introduce yourself.
I'm Camilla, I'm from Poland.
Violinist, and we have a pianist.
Federico, I'm from Italy, and I'm a pianist.
None of us is a singer, but we will try to sing. But we are not singers, so forgive us from this project. So we start with the Homme, this famous theme. So we start with Re. You have the Re, Fa, Mi, Re. to a mind like Leonardo. We'll find out what. So keep these intervals in your mind. Now the Virgin, the theme on the Virgin Mary.
Okay.
So what you hear now, you will hear starting from this prehistory to Leonardo to what Leonardo did of his own melodies. This melody, first line in the photographs, the last fragment, is written by Leonardo himself. So this fragment here. Next fragment after the line. As a third fragment, so from this line and the one in the middle, we are going to finish with this fragment here. She's running to another concert to perform a concert right now, and then we will run for the next concert after. So you take her and then you come back. Okay. So we go back. So let's start Leonardo first. So one thing about, you know the names. There's do, re, mi, fa, sol, ut, re, mi, fa, sol. So we have ut instead of do. Remember this ut will be important later. So here we have l'amore mi fa solazzare. L'amore mi fa solazzare. Some musician, if you see it up here, there is a symbol that seems like it's a silence in music. It's a Z actually. He puts in between the notes the letters that are missing in the notes. Solazzare, he puts the Z in between to fill the word. So these are all notes which become a poem. So l'amore mi fa solazzare. L'amore mi fa remirare. Or the last fragment we played, sol la fe mi fa. Only faith gives me hope. Only faith. So the fa, he writes fe. He corrects it into fe to say filling the empty notes that will give the poetry. So this is what would take a mind like Leonardo. Music, poetry, put together where you don't distinguish the sounds, the notes, and the poetry, the language. And that's his approach to music. Now, while we are thinking about music with Leonardo, do you know that Leonardo is a musician, was a musician? How many of you knew that? Leonardo, musician, musical. Did you know? You never knew that. What about Galileo Galilei? How many of you know that Galileo Galilei was a musician? Nobody. Only one. You don't count. In this percentage. And how many of you knew that Einstein was a musician? Okay, so we have at least 1, 2, 3, Einstein. So there has been a connection between music and sciences, music and culture in general, that is enormous. So when you look at a major mind, anyone who is a genius has this profound connection to music. Among these people, the only one who really rejected music, found operas very boring, and went to one time, they want to go back again, was Newton. But Newton is connected to music in other ways. But he's the only one that was like, just stay away from music. Okay. So let's go back to the mind of Leonardo as a musician. When Leonardo went to Milano to work for Ludovico il Moro, you all know the Last Supper, right? You know what I'm talking about, the Last Supper. When he went to paint the Last Supper or paint the Mona Lisa and so forth, he didn't go there as a painter, he went there as a musician. He was sent by Florence, by Lorenzo de' Medici, as an ambassador of Lorenzo de' Medici to Milano of music. Did you know that? Do you know that he played a lyra? He was an excellent musician and improviser. He was like the jazz renaissance of the time. He would play these melodies you just heard and improvise variations, sort of what is for us jazz variations today, or what was Bach. Bach did the same thing, a theme and then developed his variations, Goldberg variations. You could play from one little theme, you could play for 2 hours, or in 4 hours, you could entertain an entire night. If there was a prince that couldn't sleep at night, these musicians were able to play all night with one theme to keep music going on all night. Remember, we are in a world where there is no radio, no music, no sound really. It's a world mostly of silence and a world where there is no electric light, there is only candles. So it's a world that connected to nature. People, what they did at the time, like today we are on our phones, right? At that time, they looked at the stars and they knew exactly where every planet or star was every day of the week, every month of the year. So we have to try to enter into Leonardo's mind. So let's think right now. We know he's a musician. He goes to Milano as a musician. He goes to Milano because Leonardo's life is strictly connected with the Medici family. In the manuscript, they found actually a fragment where it says, I Medici mi hanno fatto, Medici mi hanno distrutto. Medici made me, and Medici destroyed me. Medici is the Medici family. His connection with the Medici family goes beyond anything we can think of. I'm not going to go into that. But you should know that the Medici were the famous bankers of Florence, bankers of Rome, and their connection with Milano is very strong because the original Duke of Milano, Francesco, he was a warrior. People paid him to go into war. They were mercenaries. And he came from Basilicata. He grew up in Basilicata. His wife was a Calabrese from, you know where Calabria is in the south of Italy? You know Calabria, you know Napoli, you know Sicily, you know those areas? Now, Basilicata is a little further down from Napoli. And his wife was from Calabria, was the Princess Ruffo di Calabria. And they eventually became Dukes of Milano. When the Duke arrived in Milano, the first thing he did was open a bank for the Medici family. And Leonardo had an account in this bank. Leonardo never really suffered for money. You always see Leonardo was born in the country, was poor, looking for money, forget about that. Leonardo was complaining when he was taking money out of the bank account because he didn't like to spend money from his reserve bank account. So when they didn't pay him for his work, like sometimes it would be delayed payments, he would complain and write it down. But he had money in a bank account which was provided by the family Medici throughout his life. You know, this connection with the Medici is enormous. You can go on your own, explore. There are many theories, but it's a beautiful story. So he arrives as a musician. In this case, Lorenzo il Magnifico from Florence sends him to Milano. And this ambassador goes, 3 people go to Milano, 3 friends. One is Leonardo, and he brings with him a singer whose name is like Atlante, a beautiful, gorgeous singer with those curly hair that Leonardo, like an angel, with the voice of an angel. So Leonardo plays the lyra. The lyra is made of silver with the shape of a skull, and he played the lyra beautifully. In a magistral, they describe him as really being a performer. Prego. And the third person, he was named with the nickname Zoroastro, was an alchemist. So these 3 guys, Leonardo, a singer, and alchemist. They go to Milano, they do their show, they do their performances. Leonardo was highly appreciated as an entertainer. Everybody wanted him because he could put up great shows. He would build the stage for the performances. He would perform himself. He would come up with technological inventions that would make the evening memorable. So rich people in Italy wanted to have Leonardo for his ability to entertain, to make the evening absolutely unique, to impress any guest who show up at court. Did you know anything about this, about Leonardo? Being a performer, being a guy that loved wine. With Leonardo, you want to drink wine, have great conversation, listen to music, and watch performances. So you would have singers coming out from machines with all the planets that would rotate behind, and then another plane would come out from the stage with a singer performing, singing, or performing instruments. This is what made Leonardo very popular. And so here we are establishing an idea of Leonardo as a musician. Now, why Leonardo was a musician? What was the place of music at the time? Are you familiar with the trio and quadrivio, what people were studying at the time, the university system? Do you know what the quadrivio is?
Liberal arts.
Liberal arts, everything comes from there. So the trio, it was more, if you wanted to become a lawyer, you need to go through the trio first. Everybody learned that, which was grammar, and included rhetoric, dialectic, to how to become a lawyer. You know how to write, how to speak, and how to establish an argument, or go to court, or become a poet. You needed to go through that. Then there is the quadrivium, another higher level. It's like a higher level university. The quadrivium, we have mathematics, then geometry. If you pass these two, then you could access astronomy. And after you did math, geometry, astronomy, then you could go into music. Music was the highest level of all these disciplines. Now, for us today, this is unthinkable, right? We can go straight to music without knowing anything about math or geometry. Actually, many times people just think that it's too difficult. Maybe it's easier to go straight into music. It was not possible at the time at all. So, for Leonardo, as a young person, as a young kid like you are, he went to music schools, he learned math, he learned geometry. His mind was the mind of a musician that also sees geometry and sees the shape of the universe, as they thought at the time, was all geometry and math. And music fits into this. One thing with the violinist I didn't do before, I will try to now work with me with this. Try to think of a string. A string, suppose you have a dough. A string vibrates, you have a dough. If you cut the string in half and you vibrate the half, you have another dough, the higher dough. How many of you understand this? Is this simple? Clear? Okay, so one string, dough. Half the string, higher dough. The relationship between the first dough and the second dough, which is an octave, is the relationship between 1 and 2. Okay, 1 and 2. So let's establish these numbers. You have 1, the string. The relationship between 1 and 2 is the octave. If I take that string, I divide it in 3 parts, and I put my finger on the 2/3, the sound that comes out is the sol, is the 5th. So the relationship now is going to be 2/3. The same string, I divide in 4 parts, I do 3/4, I have fa, do, fa, the 4th. That's 3/4. 3/4. Now, this is numbers, and this is music. From music, from these strings, come the stereo numbers. You know how old is this theory? We know for sure that it is at least, let's say for sure, 400 years before Christ. 450 years before Christ. So we're talking 2,500 years ago. It's a very old theory that comes from somebody called Pythagoras. Do you know Pythagoras? Pythagoras. Do you know where Pythagoras was when he created this theory? When it happened? Where in the world? Pythagoras, where?
for the sailing boat. Sailing boat. according
Sailing
to
boat?
this, yeah.
Or where? Sicily?
Calabria.
Calabria,
Bravo.
Crotone, Calabria. In Crotone, Calabria. He was born in a Greek island in Samos, but he didn't get along with his own people. So he went to Calabria, he loved the place, he established himself there, created a school, and with his own students, at the time the students and teachers would kind of live together all day long, and of course they talk, exchange ideas. Pythagoras had almost a church following. There were rules among the students who was more prepared, less prepared. In fact, among the students, the only students who could directly talk to Pythagoras were the people that were geometra. They had already understood everything about geometry. If you knew everything about geometry, it meant you already had been able to catch the essence of the universe, then you could talk to Pythagoras. All the other students, they could not look at Pythagoras in the face, they looked from the back, just to say how ritual the whole thing was. Now, math, geometry, astronomy, and music are all disciplines meant to find the infinite, the God, the universe. This was the sense of all this quadrivium in each one of these disciplines. Now, I'm saying this now because these things are going to be in Leonardo's mind. Everything I tell you right now is what Leonardo learned as a young man and what made Leonardo who he became later. So if people tell you that Leonardo was just a self-taught thing, it's just not correct. Leonardo had good education at different stages of his life, and at one point he was surrounded by the best minds of the time. His friends were great philosophers, great mathematicians, great poets. He was surrounded by the top culture of the time. A genius usually doesn't come from nothing. There is always an environment around, and that creates the base for the genius. Now, go back to our numbers. So we know we are in South Italy, and we are in Calabria. Now, 100 years before Pythagoras, another person there in Campania, Napoli, in the area of Napoli, and have you heard about Anaximandro? Have you heard about Parmenide? Parmenide is familiar to you? No. Okay, let's skip over. But I invite you to look at these names, and I want to tell you what they thought of the world at the time, 2,600 years ago. For example, this guy thought that a cylinder, this was Earth, and there was nothing around it. Earth was suspended with the shape of a cylinder, which is an interesting thing, because the Earth is a sphere. This guy, 2,500 years ago, already thought of something not far from the reality. Not only that, this guy knew also that if a stone fell on the ground, he theorized also that on the other side, on the antipodes, another stone will fall the opposite way. 2,600 years ago. So remember, when you think about Newton, gravity, what do you know about Newton? Do you believe in the apple? Was the apple the essence? If you have a symbol from Newton, would the symbol be the apple? Right? It's impossible, because this is the apple that falls. And we knew that 2,500 years ago. So Newton could not be excited about that. Right? Newton was excited about something else. He looked at the moon. He said the moon is falling. If a stone is falling, the moon is falling on Earth. And he proved that in fact the moon is falling on Earth. But the fall of the moon is not straight like the apple. But the fall of the moon, like Galileo was showing, is delayed, goes like this. And the Earth is round, so the moon keeps falling all around us and enters the orbit. So Newton is not the apple, it's the moon. The moon is not falling here, but keeps falling and never hits Earth. But the concept is that the moon is falling into this orbit because it's attracted by Earth. This is clear. So let's go back to our concept here. 2,600 years ago, they knew that. Then, with this concept in mind, let's say 300, I'll give you round numbers to make it easier to remember. Let's say 250 years before Christ. So before we said 2,500, now we do 2,250. All the dates you will find written here. Later on we go through this. I want to give you this concept. You know Archimedes. Archimedes, remember we said Eureka, 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 Eureka. What was Eureka about? Anyone remembers anything? Just, what do you associate Eureka with what? What?
Sitting down in his bathtub.
In the bathtub, the bathtub. So what did he find? Why he was so excited? Because the water came out.
And it was equal to his mass that went into the bathtub.
So he was taking a bath, and the water was, stand up, tell
It
everybody.
was equal to.
Stand up. Yeah. The water that came out was equal to the mass that had entered
The bathtub.
the bathtub. This means what? That water fills any empty space, right? So if I put a body in the bathtub, the water goes out. But if the body comes out, the water refills the space. The reason he was screaming Eureka, Eureka was because he finally could demonstrate that Earth was a sphere. Okay, 2,250 years ago. And Leonardo knew all these things. I will tell you why he knew and how he knew all these things, all this history from the past. So the concept is fantastic because all of a sudden we have an Earth which is round, demonstrated by Archimedes. The other one. Now, the Earth is round. Why? They knew when they were, who said before about the boat? You. They were, these people, 3,000 years before us, used to travel more than we travel. All of us here, we travel a fragment of how much those people used to travel. So every time they went across to Libya, Egypt, Sicily, south of France, Spain, Cyprus, Jerusalem. Jerusalem was not Christian yet, but people were there. The Jewish community was strong. So all this traveling, they always knew that before they arrived into the land, the port, they would see the mountain first. They would see the Acropolis first, and then they would see the port. They knew that there was a curve. So every time they traveled, they were, especially traveling through the sea, they constantly experienced that the earth was round. So they knew there was a curve, right? If there is a curve, and there is all that water, and they knew about the water, not just Mediterranean, they had been exploring, the Carthaginians had gone outside into the Atlantic, north and south, they've been traveling extensively. So they knew that there was a curve. Therefore, Archimedes screams, Eureka, Eureka, I found out, because if there is a curve here, and there is water, and this water fills any empty space, then Earth must be round. Okay? Did you know that? 2,250 years ago, they knew that. Now, some people, I've heard people that hear, oh, Christopher Columbus found out that Earth was round. Wrong. Totally wrong, right? So, I give you these things here so that you can go, all the names are here, the dates are here, go and search, and be curious about this, and find out how many things in the past were not. Now, let's go back to our numbers. So we have established a fascination with the curve. We know the curve. We have established a fascination with the circle and the sphere. There is another fascination very important of the time. The cube. Square and cube. Do you know the most important cubes in the world 3,000 years ago, where they were? Delphi, the oracle, have you heard about the stories? No? The Zoroastrians, have you heard about Zoroastrians? In Persia? We played some concerts actually in Georgia, Tbilisi, and we went specifically to see some Zoroastrian temples. They were found, these are from 3,000 years ago, and these specific temples that we visited, they found everything that was there at the time, exactly 2,300 years ago, because Alexander the Great went there and caught people by surprise. So these people ran away from their village and their temples, and they left everything possible there. And there were cups that Alexander the Great actually took and drank from. that we were drinking last week wine out of these cups. We have these pictures which are totally amazing. Alexander the Great encountered the Zoroastrians. Zoroastrians is a very old religion that precedes Christianity, precedes even the Jewish religion, the Hebrew culture, and Zoroastrians had, their temple was a cube. The same cube went into the Greek culture. So the cube, which eventually will represent Earth, also for Leonardo, is another ancient, the square, the cube. Now remember now where we are going to get later with these forms. So we have a curve, we have a circle and a sphere, we have a square and a cube. Very ancient symbols. Let's go back to Pythagoras. So we have this guy Pythagoras, he finds these numbers, he loves math, he loves geometry. He said these numbers are fantastic. 1, 2, 3, 4. Basic, simple, beautiful numbers. So he creates his own coat of arms. Like you have the king of Thailand, right? You know the coat of arms of the king of Thailand. There are symbols inside. Now, the coat of arms of Pythagoras was this. He puts 1, and then he has 2. Then 3 is the third number, 3. And then 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you see what happens here? A triangle. So you have the Pythagoras triangle and these numbers from music, and then you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and the number 10. So Pythagoras will be connected to the number 10, will be connected to the number 3, the triangle, and all these symbols will be part of the Pythagoras philosophy and go straight into Leonardo's mind. Can I cancel this? Is this clear for you? Will you remember when I talk about Pythagoras? We have this. Now, back to Pythagoras. Pythagoras found out also something else very interesting, the sezione aurea, the golden ratio. Who knows the golden ratio? Yes? Yes? How many don't? Because if you know it, I don't need to explain. I do. A rectangle. You have rectangle, different kind of rectangle. It could be like this, right? And it could be like this. Longer, shorter, and so forth. Some of these rectangles have proportions which are called golden ratio, golden proportion. Now this is something that comes straight from Pythagoras. How do you get this? Let's suppose this is a square. From this square, he puts down a compass, like this, and goes down like this. Do you see that? So this rectangle here will have a square, and then this extra space here. You see that? Now, the golden ratio rectangular, which you can find telephones are built in this way, credit cards are built with these proportions. So we all carry these golden proportions. All this, all the proportion between here and here, there is a magic number, 1.618 and ever and ever and ever. You can write numbers forever. It's a concept of the infinite. It's a number that goes forever. Now, infinite is an enormous concept. To understand how important is the infinite, have you heard about Filippo Giordano Bruno? Does this name say anything to you? Do you know? Filippo Giordano Bruno was a monk, a theologian, a philosopher that was killed in the year 1600, burned in Rome in Piazza Campo dei Fiori in February of the year 1600, because he would not give up his certainty of the infinite universe, infinite earth, infinite. The infinite was such a difficult concept. The church would not accept that concept, to the point that they burned somebody like him. So keep in mind how this is important. The same concept made Galileo so afraid that he had to say that just what he was talking about was just a joke, that he didn't really mean what his theories were all about. So the concept of infinite was a concept that eventually would cost life to people. but was a concept as old as Pythagoras, so we're talking again 2,400 years ago, and is a concept inside Leonardo's mind. So we have all these things, and then there is a concept of infinite within the mind of Leonardo. So remember all these concepts together. Why this is important? Because this rectangular, if you build a Greek temple, and you are in Greece or in Sicily, any Greek temple that you experience, and then there are columns and so forth, and then the steps down here. All the Greek temple fits within a golden rectangular. There are golden ratio rectangle inside here, everywhere there are golden ratio rectangular. The guy that did this is Phidia. Phidia was a sculptor. Phidia is the one that built the temples. And there is the letter Phi, the Greek letter Phi, Phidia, represents this infinite number. 1.618 is the Phi number, Greek letter Phi. So remember Phi as this infinite number that comes from Pythagoras. Phidia took it from Pythagoras. The same number goes into Leonardo. Before we were talking about Archimedes. Archimedes was obsessed with circles and spheres. Archimedes, their mind worked always geometrically. So for example, if they look at the moon, they would try to say, how big is the moon? It could be as big as this island, as big as this part of this land. They would try always to fit things and make them measurable. If you owned this piece of land, and you needed to know the measurement of this land, they would try to transform the shape into a rectangle or into a square that would be easy to measure. So that's the way they were thinking. At one point, we were trying to figure out if the circle would fit in a square. And this was something that humanity has been dealing with forever. Circle and square. Remember Leonardo? The Leonardo man, square, and then the circle. That's the connection. How can we make the square and the circle fit? Today with the computer we know that it is impossible. But with our computer before, they know there was infinite task that we are striving to reach it. So back to Archimedes. Archimedes was able to find the circumference, surface of the circle. You know that how he did it, right? There is the radius, and then there is the special number, another magic number, the pi. You know the pi? 3.1415, sequence of number infinite again. So we have another infinite. We have Phidia, Phi, and we have pi with Pythagoras. Two infinite numbers. In the mind of Leonardo, these numbers are there. Okay? Another important thing about Archimedes, we said the sphere, we said the circle. This radius, if you extend the radius like this all around the circle, you obtain a polygon with 6 sides. But instead of using the full radius, if you take the gold ratio part of the radius, so the 1.615 section of this projects around the circle with the number 10, the Pythagorean number, 10. You remember the triangle, the number 10? So these numbers have to be in our mind because they have an enormous symbolism for everything you find in Leonardo. Okay, so we said Archimedes. So Archimedes is in Syracuse, in Sicily. Libya, south of Archimedes, there is another guy whose name is Eratosthene. Have you heard about Eratosthene? Eratosthene? No. Okay. Do you know Ptolemaeus? Okay. Let's stay with Eratosthene. This guy was in Libya. Archimedes was in Syracuse. They were from rich family, they would allow them to study, and the place to go and study was Alexandria of Egypt. and they became schoolmates in Alexandria, Egypt. When they went, eventually Eratosthenes becomes the director of the library in Alexandria, which was like the University of the Mediterranean. And Archimedes went back to Syracuse and continued working as a mathematician, as a scientist of the time. And he was more a philosopher of mathematics. And the two of them corresponded, like every month. They would send letters and they would exchange results. I make it short, but you have to search on your own. Eratosthenes was able, because remember he was like the ministry of the, in Italian we call this the Ministero della Topografia, Toponomastica della Topografia, how do you say for Thailand, questo ministero, come si può chiamare? It's a ministry that measures all the lands in order to tax people, right? So the government, in order to tax you, knows exactly how big is your home, and they know perfectly in order to tax you as much as possible.
Land department.
Land department. Eratosthenes from Egypt, they had numbers, and here we're talking about, remember, 250 years before Christ. They could measure all the way to the Sea of China and half of the world, because once they knew that the world was a perfect sphere, they could apply. A guy from Messina, Dicearchus of Messina, Messina is another town in Sicily. This guy was the first to actually sign down a meridian and a parallel. So they had meridian and parallel. Then they knew there was a sphere, so they knew there was 360 degrees. And they write actually that they knew half of the world, 180 degrees. But then later on with the Romans, with Ptolemy, we have other writers that say, we know half of the world, but we take care only of the parts that we know, the Ecumeneo that we know, the part that we know, which is the part we can tax. But there is another part over there, after the Mediterranean, after Portugal, which we don't care about measuring or working, because from there no problems are going to come, no army is going to come to invade us, and we have no interest in going and taxing them because there is no money to pay us. So these are things written in 2,000 years ago. So these people, I cannot tell you now, we don't have time, but believe me, and you find on your own, they were able to measure land distances. They knew in Aswan, south of Egypt, in the solstice, summer solstice, winter solstice, they knew exactly with the shade of the triangle of Pythagoras, the triangles of Euclid, all this geometry. And if you have a pole on a certain month of the year, there is a different shade with the sun, and they knew with a triangle, the shade was one of the sides of the triangles. They could measure perfectly how the circumference of Earth, you know what was their number? 1% off. Instead of 40,000 kilometers, their number was 36,000 kilometers. The number of the time was stadiums, was another unit. But they knew the circumference of the Earth. When Christopher Columbus went to America, he actually made an enormous mistake. He took wrong numbers. He took numbers that had been lost in the transition when the Romans came in and then Carthaginians were destroyed. We have after 50 to 100 years where Romans were very good engineers, but they were not mathematicians, neither philosophers, but they were engineers. They built beautiful things. But all this philosophy of math and measurements kind of got lost a little bit with the Romans. So when Ptolemy put things together to create this base of research to tax, basically, people, got the wrong stadium. There were a section of islands called the Isole Fortunate, which they thought they were the Canarian Islands. So for many centuries, everybody thought the Canarian Islands were the Isole Fortunate. Now some researchers in the past 30 years found out that the original Isole Fortunate were not where Ptolemy put them, which are in the center of Africa, right? But the Carthaginians knew they were the Antilles. They knew exactly half of the world, and they are lined up exactly the way the Antilles are, and not the way the Canarian Islands are. So for a long time, we thought that the geography was incompetent at the time, and they put the Canarian Islands inside Africa, and with a different direction, north, south, east, west. No way, those people would not settle for these big mistakes. They knew much better. So remember, we have all this knowledge. Gets lost, Christopher Columbus thinks that the Earth is only 25,000 kilometers, makes a mistake. Thanks to these mistakes, he thinks he can do around the Earth, and thank God he found America. He found America. Aristotle, you know Aristotle? These people were fascinated with tides as well. They were looking at nature all the time. Leonardo was going up in the mountains in Italy and found shells up in the mountains. It was like, what are the shells doing up here? Was the sea here before? So, into this mind, the mind of the ancient European, ancient makes only 3,000 years ago, but still it's ancient. And Leonardo, they work in the same way. Why Leonardo was excited about this? Because right in his century, the 1400, the Constantinople, which was the Eastern Roman Empire, fell to the Arabs. And all these Greek-speaking scholars from Constantinople, between 1417, 1423, up to 1453, eventually they have to move completely, they went back to Italy. And where did they go? In the places where people spoke Greek. Who spoke Greek? Sicily, Calabria, Messina had a great Greek academy. And it was so important that rich people from Venice, they could afford to send their kids anywhere. Pietro Bembo, future cardinal, was sent with his friends, with a couple of his friends, to Messina to study for 2 years. Because out of this Greek literature, they found all this ancient Greek knowledge, and they went crazy for it. So by the time Leonardo was growing, people were crazy with these concepts of Greek and Latin history. Math, there's another guy here, 1,200, between 210, let's put as a reference date. Fibonacci, Leonardo Fibonacci. Have you heard about it? Fibonacci. There are two Leonardos, right? Leonardo Fibonacci, and Fibonacci is not a town. He's the son of, and Leonardo was working for his father. They were merchants, so they were going all around the Mediterranean, selling and buying. And with the Latin numeral system, it was very difficult to do calculations. So this Leonardo Fibonacci comes up with a numerical structure that made it simpler to communicate numbers. Invented account, it was like the first real accountant. He created a system for accounting. From the school invented and created by Leonardo Fibonacci, Leonardo da Vinci goes to school into these abacus, the schools created by Leonardo Fibonacci. That's why it's important to know Leonardo Fibonacci. Everything is here. You guys have to go home and search. I won't stop today, right? But everything you find here, you have to know every single baseline to understand a little bit of what was going on in Leonardo's mind. Leonardo Fibonacci. Quickly, what he does is, we have the Roman numbers, right? This is number 1, right? Then he says, let's do number 2. 1 and 2. With a little connection here, which looks like what? Right? Now number 3. 1, 2, 3. Little connection here. And you have 3. Right? And then you have number 4, which I do incorrectly, 4. This becomes 5. Then this becomes 6. Right? Oh, it becomes 8. The 7 was the most difficult. Now, number 7, I remember when I came in the States, to the United States, and I thought I was now in the United States. When I went to America, first thing they changed in my writing was the number 7. I had to learn to do 7 like this. My 7 was much more complicated. It was like this, right? So I removed the thing. It was a Baroque 7 that I learned in my schooling in Italy. This is a Fibonacci 7. It has 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 fragments. That's Fibonacci number. From the Arabs, he took the number 9. That's Arab. And from the Indians, he took the number 0, the non-number. Because we did not have 0. The Arabs did not have 0. It was the Indians they got the 0. So this numerical system for Leonardo was recent, was like a discovery 200 years before. Even 200 years is like 5, 6 generations. Your great-grandparents just learned. And by the time people really learned it, they were excited about this. So this is part of the education of Leonardo. What you see? Numbers, which are the result of geometry. So remember everything we're talking about here. The Greek temples before. When you look at the Greek temple, you look at the base, you think the base is straight, right? Otherwise, if you don't have a straight base, the columns will fall. So first you would think the base would have to be straight. No. The base, by the figures of the time, by the architects of the time, was curved. Because there is no straight line. The horizon, Earth, is round. So the base of the temples is a round line. With this, I'll tell you another obsession. You have a line, you have a curve. Another obsession in Leonardo's mind, as well in the ancient mind, was how do you straighten a curve? Curved line. They used to say between 2 points you can have only one straight line. They were like, no, because in our 2 points of Earth, in our 2 points, there is a curve. You can have a curve between these two straight lines. But we never believed this until when? Until Einstein proved that even light does not go straight, goes on a curve. You follow me on this, right? So we can see a star behind the sun because the light of the star reaches us in a curve. So you see how important these elements are. Another thing, the dot, the atom, the indivisible atom. Who taught this to us? Einstein, right? The atomic theory. Now, go back 2,500 years before, and you find Leucippus, you find Democritus, people that had created the theory of the atom. Atom. A means not divisible, the undivisible unit. All ancient culture knew and believed in this undivisible unit. So even when we found out that the atom could be divided in protons, in electrons, still the little cell that is undivisible is still an ancient concept of 2,500 years ago. That old. With this concept in mind, are you familiar with the Higgs boson? The Higgs fields. Anybody knows the Higgs fields? Go and search. Only the Higgs now new research has changed that atomic theory, because now we believe that there are these fields which are fields of almost nothing, fields of almost nothingness. This nothingness eventually vibrates. The word is not correct. I shouldn't even say vibration, because there is no vibration if there is nothing. But these fields, let's say there is a move, and here and there sometimes this is dust that collects and creates an element. And from there comes the primordial atom. So only now, in the last few decades, we have gone beyond the atomic theory. The atom has been living for 2,500 years until today. Okay? Can we try to go back to Leonardo again? Where these things, how many minutes I have left? Where are we?
It's after 1.
Huh?
It's 1 o'clock.
Oh. Okay, then let's jump to the end of it. Yeah, I will try to do that. I promise. If you can you say 3 minutes?
Yeah,
You can. Okay. Now, let's assume that we know everything that's going on in mind of Leonardo. Okay, let's assume that. Next year we continue this lecture to us. So now, picture the Last Supper. I think there is a small picture here somewhere. Here. This page with the music, there is a Last Supper down there. Okay. Now, you go home and you look for the Last Supper in the correct proportions, so that you can see what I'm going to try to tell you now. Now, if you look at Leonardo's painting, everything in Leonardo's painting is music, white music. He himself wrote down that because music was the highest level of the quadrivium, Leonardo thought that he could bring painting to a level that is superior to music. How do you do that? By putting in painting math, geometry, astronomy, and music into painting. So painting will go higher. Another concept. Music, we listen to music, and music goes away. Once a piece has been performed, you walk out, and you are free to forget what you heard. And you can say, oh, I like this piece. No, you think I understood, I didn't understand, but that's fine. Music is gone, so you have nothing to confront your own ignorance. We don't know how stupid we are in front of a piece of music because it's gone. It's not there to remind us that we didn't understand anything. And Leonardo writes this. He says, in front of one of my paintings, you cannot escape and say the music is gone. The painting is in front of you. It will remind you always of your ignorance. So when we are in front of Leonardo, he knew already that we look at the painting and chances are we don't understand anything about it, or we understand 1 cent or 1/10 or 1/89 or whatever. But he knew that to understand 100% of his painting was going to be a challenge to our own brains. So that's why he brings painting to a total new level. I give you an example now with the Last Supper. The Last Supper, you have this background, beautiful background. Remember the Pythagorean triangle, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4 eventually are the symbols of earth, water, sky, fire. Philosophy put together by Plotinus, that means add together Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, St. Augustine, and all these things fit into the symbolism. So when you look at the Last Supper, you have a background, you see the mountains far, which are the mountains of Milano, the background of the north side where the painting is. And basically from inside, you look outside the room and you can see the mountains behind. Then if you take the profile of those mountains, it's fantastic how these profiles are kind of match the shape, the position chosen for the apostles. The apostles are divided in 4 groups. So remember Pythagoras again, 4 groups of apostles. Each group has 3 apostles. In the middle is Jesus in a triangle shape, a Pythagorean, a Pythagoras shape, which is also a pyramid, but it's too long to explain now why it's also a pyramid. Then you have to look at all the feet, the position of the feet of the apostle. When you look at the painting, look at that, because the monks opened a door right where Jesus' feet are, and you don't see them today. When you go, if you see it, remember to look at the feet of the apostles, because also there is another line of music. You can trace a pentagram throughout that painting and find music, and you can start visualizing the shape and the music in it. Then you go to the sound. Now, the Testament, the Old Testament, those who are familiar with Christianity, we know that everything came from the word, la parola. The word was the origin of everything. The parola is sound. Sound is the origin of everything. Jesus, in that specific moment, says one specific thing to the apostle. He says, one of you, in truth I tell you, one of you will betray me. Leonardo writes the theory of sound specifically to this. The moment a sound comes out, the last one of the apostle on this side and the last one of the apostle on the other side will be the last one to hear. The closest to him will be the first to hear. So you find the first apostle on this, James the Older, he was just like this. The last apostle that is like, what did he say? The one over there stands up and says, did I hear right? Is that right? And so Bartholomew is surprised at this. All these apostles then have a connection with hands. One is touching the shoulder of the other one with a knife right here, which is symbolism, because eventually will cut the ear of somebody else later on in the story. And all this vibration from the original string, the original sound, you see all this vibration. And from those vibrations, there are the vibrations that go behind and forward. Because you see the mountains in the back with the blue color. Are the mountains blue? I've never seen a blue mountain. Have you seen a blue mountain? But they are blue because Leonardo is telling us there is air, and the air transforms the color. The blue indicates the depth there. And so then there is symbolism for the sun, the 3 doors in the back, the solstice, summer solstice, on all the symbolism of sun and moon. But Jesus does not say a word. You will find Jesus with one hand like this and one hand like this. One hand says, I accept what is going to happen. The other hand is the human side, the right, it seems to resist a little bit. If you go into Antonella da Messina and Madonna Annunciation, you will find a connection between the hand of the Jesus here and the Antonella da Messina at the time was working in Venice, had a strong influence on the Florentine school. And Jesus doesn't say anything because God is the source of everything. He's the source of the sound. But because philosophical from Plotinus comes this theory, it emanates sound. Everything emanates from God. But there is no active will of creation. So Jesus, in fact, he doesn't even open his lips. He's still there in the middle. And on the right and on the left, there is drama. And each one of these apostles has a story. Each one of them. Even St. Thomas with the finger like this, he said, it's the finger that will touch Jesus eventually after the crucifixion. All this, if you look with the eyes of the musicians, you can say that this is the first Italian opera. We don't have to wait till 1600. He was a guy that always created operas for the entertainment of the rich people. And he made an opera, but if you sit in front of this piece, stay there 2 hours, 3 hours, like an opera. Sorry? Okay, she said they don't let you there. It's impossible to go personally there. But there are excellent reproductions of it. One we just saw in Tbilisi, in the Georgian National Museum, an amazing, beautiful, like this wall, enormous, beautiful giganto projection. And it's perfectly beautiful to enjoy it. And what I'm trying to say is when you sit, plan to stay in front of the opera and not go all the way to Milan because it's impossible. But when you stay 2-3 hours in front of that photo you have in front of you, because it actually is worth the time to study each one of the personages, and you will find an entire complete story, not even 2 hours, and it will be a Wagner opera of 7 hours. Everything is there, it's happening at the same time, and there is present, future, past, all happening in the same work. Thank you for your patience. Thank you so much. We have to run now for another concert, but I want to give you the email, my email, so if you have questions, you can reach us with questions. So the foundation is called IBLA, I-B-L-A, which is... So the email would be IBLA, New York, all attached, all small letters. IBLA New York at gmail.com. So when
Right, gmail.com. Right, gmail.com.
Yeah. Gmail.com. IBLA New York at gmail.com. Then when you go through this at home, when you have time, go line by line. Each name is a key. You explore each name, each date, each concept, and then you put together in the course of the next 6 months, you will understand what Leonardo, what was there. Grazie ancora.